Hi, this is Michelle with Collective Consciousness. I wanted to put together a video where I'm talking to you about what it is that I do regarding how I receive the messages from Collective Consciousness. And I wanted to start out by saying that I have been receiving messages from the collective for many years. I recall in some way feeling guided to actually to pick up the domain for collectiveconsciousness.com many years ago, something like 13 or 14 years ago. And that was also around the same time that I decided to take up meditation, and I've been meditating since then very consistently. But anyways, I recall very specifically receiving blocks of information when I used to live in South America, and I recall receiving the messages and sometimes even getting excited about the messages. I probably would receive a couple messages that I was aware of, maybe a couple messages a month. And I always talked to whoever it was, my son, my husband, one of my girlfriends, about the messages. And but I never wrote them down. And then we moved to back to the U.S., and that's when I decided, I didn't decide anything. Then we moved here, and after about 4 years of living here, I distinctly recall, 4 years of receiving lots of messages, practically on a multiple time per week basis, but I still wasn't recognizing that they were, how shall I say this? I did recognize that there were messages, but I didn't recognize that that they were from any particular group, or that in any way that I was just receiving. I didn't distinguish that these thoughts were not mine. And it wasn't until I finally heard write these messages down. And that's about the third time that I heard it. And I thought, oh, okay, fine, I'm going to write them down. I was reluctant, and I went and decided to write them down. So the very next evening, because I do tend to receive messages, that the vast majority are in the evening when I lay down for bed. Sometimes I get messages when I'm in the bathtub or out by the swimming pool or something like that. I get messages. One day I was walking through the airport, and I practically didn't even have enough time to write down all my messages, because I was in the airport walking from one terminal to the other as I was receiving messages. And so I just was constantly walking around with my notepad and pen as I walked through the airport, writing down this information. But so back to what I was saying a moment ago. So I got the message to write down these messages. And that evening, I was really surprised with how much I wrote down. It ended up being maybe 3 or 4 pages worth of, on a legal size notepad worth of information. And I recognized right away a couple of differences in the quality of the writing, if you want to say that. My regular writing is much sloppier. I've always had difficulty in having neat writing. It's just never been that way. And also the material just seemed to flow out of me. I didn't give it any thought. All I was doing was getting the information or receiving the intel, and then writing it down as the words just flowed out of me. And I also noticed that as time progressed, I was also receiving images. I had been receiving images before, but not consistently with all of the messages. So as my commitment to writing down the messages increased over time, I started getting more and more clear visual representations of what it was that these messages were about. So the visual representations were great because they were there to help clarify the whole message. And then after I really started to get used to that, there was one day that I decided, oh, let me ask some questions. And I did get answers that day. But there were other days that I asked questions and I didn't get any answers. And I just figured, well, these are messages that I just need to receive. I just need to receive them. I don't necessarily, I don't need to change the way they come. Yes, I would have loved it if they were question and answers, but it just didn't come that way. And at that moment, I was okay with that. And then maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, I decided to see if I could also speak the message instead of writing it. And I had tried doing that before, but I was speaking so slowly. I think I was only speaking slowly because I was also writing it down. And so it was way too easy for me to kind of lose my place with the thought. It was like the ideas of the messages that I was receiving, they were slipping out of my mind so quickly. I couldn't keep up. So it was much easier for me to just write it at the time. And I did accomplish about filling up about 13 to 15 legal size notepads within about a year. So it was a very large amount of information I received in a year. A lot of the messages that were covered in there were, I felt like could have been subjects that could have been covered in books in the future. Anyways, so I did decide again to try verbally receiving the message, and I just left the idea behind of writing down the messages, so just for that evening. And I was surprised because the words were flowing out of me so quickly that the idea came to my mind that I could be recording these. And I looked for a recording transcription app, and I found a great one. And ever since then, I've been recording, audio recording myself when I receive the messages. And also about 2 months ago, to my surprise, one day in the middle of receiving the messages. So I was in the middle of receiving a message. I was probably 3 or 4 minutes into it. I realized that I was speaking in Spanish, and I am fluent. I am fluent in Spanish, so it wasn't such a stretch. Let's see. But it was still surprising nonetheless because I didn't make any deliberate effort to speak in Spanish. And that was my first recording in Spanish. And I think it was a 55-minute long recording. Maybe one of these days I'll put it up. That could be really interesting. And I speak fairly well Spanish. My English is much vaster in English. So that's my only... I regret that I don't speak better Spanish, or at least the level of proficiency that I have with English. The other thing I wanted to say is, I do have another YouTube channel that I'm working on developing as well. It's in Spanish. And the other thing that I wanted to cover, and I have a little note here, so in case I forget anything, but the subjects. I wanted to cover the subjects that I plan on making videos about, because these are the subjects that I receive messages about. Obviously, I receive personal messages, and I do think that the personal messages have a lot of validity for everyone, but those are the messages, obviously, that I'll withhold sharing for the most part, unless I feel like it's something that is valuable for anybody to hear. But the subjects are current events, cosmic intel, self-sovereignty, humanity as far as updates about the future, as well as interests about the past, and future predictions, as well as life hacks. And the life hacks, I receive messages about life hacks, but I also plan on doing videos about my own personal life hacks, things that I've done over years of my life that have really improved the quality of my life, however small or however large in any way. It's sort of something that I just really enjoy doing. I love sharing information with people that I feel like can improve their life. Well, Again, my name is Michelle Zena, and this is I'm speaking for Collective Consciousness. So that's another thing. One of the messages that I got was that Collective Consciousness and myself, there was an agreement made that I would be speaking for them, for Collective Consciousness. I'll make another video of who Collective Consciousness is, and this was an agreement that I did a long time ago, perhaps even pre-birth, and that's why I was encouraged to pick up the domain for Collective Consciousness so many years ago. In fact, they even went into more details about why it is that one of the reasons why I felt pulled to move to South America, and that was because the profession that I chose when I was there was I was an interpreter, translator, personal assistant for the expat community, and that job required that I level up my ability to receive information and communicate for other people, which in a way is very similar to what I'm doing right now with Collective Consciousness. So, and on top of that, it was an opportunity for me to improve my Spanish while I was there for 4 years. So I hope you enjoyed this information, get a little background on who I am and how it is that I receive these messages. And the reason why I started this channel is simply because I wanted to share the messages. That's what I felt like I needed to do. I hope you have a fantastic week. Be well.